Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a third presentation on prejudice and intolerance in America in the 1920s. This time focusing on the new immigrants to America. America had been an irresistible attraction to many Europeans in the 18th and 19th centuries. Whether they were escaping poverty, persecution, or both, America was seen as the new world, the land of opportunity, a chance for a new start. And this carried on into the 20th century. But by then, there was a hierarchy of immigrants. At the top, those first immigrants, mostly from Western and Northern Europe, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, known as WASPs. However, by the late 19th century, most immigrants came from Southern or Eastern Europe, Italy, Poland and Russia, and most were Catholics or else Jews. There were also Hispanics from Mexico and Central and South America, also mostly congregating on America's west coast, Asians, Chinese and Japanese. And there were a lot of them. In the first decade of the 20th century, immigration into America was at an all-time high. For example, between June 1920 and June 1921, 800,000 new immigrants arrived. But many Americans had come to believe that the ideal American citizen was a WASP. They now felt threatened by these new arrivals, as they congregated with their own kind in ghettos, and Americans were quick in blaming them for their city's problems, particularly rising crime. And as I said, a hierarchy of immigrants and other minorities was developing. The established immigrants, the likes of Irish Americans, French Canadians and German Americans, who competed for the better jobs and better housing, looked down on the newer immigrants, the Italians and those from Eastern Europe, who in turn looked down on Mexicans and African Americans. But more than anything, these new immigrants were seen as a threat to the American way, which had been built on a white Anglo-Saxon West European culture. World War I had helped to bring about the creation of a Bolshevik state in Russia. Some Americans were concerned that immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe would bring these communist and anarchist ideas with them, challenging the American way, perhaps fatally. Whether communists or anarchists, or neither, people who carried what were deemed to be un-American ideas were labelled together as Reds. It all helped to feed the Red Scare that lasted from 1919 to 1921, and in truth never really went away. The communists were trying to destroy the American way of life. However, the strikes that led to the Red Scare were a result of job losses as men were laid off as World War I contracts ended, or else they were striking to improve working conditions, as men in heavy industries were often working 12 hours a day, or else low pay, as wages fell way behind the cost of living. But there was little sympathy for the strikers, and employers, with government approval, used heavy-handed tactics against them. Consequently, violence became a characteristic of the Red Scare years. Now there were indeed anarchists amongst the new immigrants, and they published and distributed pamphlets in America's major cities. A socialist party, and a communist party had been formed, and fears of anarchism were greatly increased by a series of bomb attacks, the hallmark of anarchists, during 1919. In April, a bomb went off in a Milwaukee church, killing 10 people, and bombs were sent to 36 prominent Americans. One such attack, made on the home of the Attorney General Mitchell Palmer, almost succeeded in killing him. The press was whipping up hysteria amongst ordinary people, and the socialist parades on May Day 1919 were attacked by mobs, and by the police too. A General Intelligence Division was set up in the Department of Justice. It was run by J. Edgar Hoover. Socialist organisations were raided and their books and pamphlets seized. Files were made on some 60,000 suspects, which led to the arrests of about 6,000 suspected communists and anarchists in 36 different cities across America. But most of them were able to prove that they were not communists or anarchists, and so the Red Scare faded. Still, many felt that something had to be done to curb immigration. A literacy test had been introduced in 1917 to restrict the poorer would-be immigrants, and an Immigration Quota Act in 1921 which restricted the number of immigrants to 357,000 a year and introduced a quota system which restricted the number of immigrants from any one country to 3% of the total from that country who were living in America in 1910. Then the 1924 National Origins Act, or Johnson-Reed Act, reduced the total number of immigrants to just 164,000 per year, and reduced the quota from any one country to 2%, and based it on the 1890 census, which meant very low numbers from Southern and Eastern Europe, and it barred Asians altogether. Then, in 1929, immigration was restricted to just 150,000 immigrants per year. So, by 1930, immigration from Eastern and Southern Europe, as well as from Asia, had virtually stopped. But it was the arrest, trial, conviction, and ultimately the penalty paid by 2 Italian-born labourers, Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, that did most to illustrate the hostility, not just to radicals, but to immigrants in general. And you will know all about that, so I won't go into it, except to say that the trial had been a sensation in America and had been reported all over the world. Sacco and Vanzetti had not been tried for the crime they were accused of committing, but for their politics, and because they were Italian immigrants. In the 1970s, the governor of Massachusetts granted Sacco and Vanzetti a full pardon, accepting that a grave mistrial had taken place. So, a third presentation for you on the prejudice and intolerance found in America in the 1920s. Lots more detail in my ebook on American society. And don't forget, there's my website, History Made Easier too. But for now, I will simply thank you for listening and wish you luck in your studies. Cheers.